Welcome to my presentation on rising sea levels and climate migration in the South Pacific. I'm focusing on three low-lying island nations: Tuvalu, Kiribati, and the Marshall Islands. These communities are on the front lines of the climate crisis happening right now. I chose this topic because I wanted to see how people deal with their islands sinking and what it takes to pack up and move to places like Australia and New Zealand. It takes a ton of strategy and resilience to make that transition. This ties right into our core themes of human environment, interaction, and geopolitics, because we're looking at how a change in physical environment can completely reshape population patterns and political borders. Over the next few minutes, I'll look at how these communities are speaking up on the world stage to protect their culture and their homes. My thesis is this: even though the South Pacific is usually seen as a tropical paradise, for the people living over there for the last 10 years, it's actually a restricted landscape where survival and keeping their statehood depends on how they navigate these complex migration pathways. To understand why this journey is so important, we have to look at what's happening to the environment right now. The South Pacific has always been seen as an isolated paradise, but for the people living there, it's turned into a major crisis of rising tides and failing infrastructure. For a long time, researchers assumed these islands had a sort of dynamic adaptability, which is just the idea that living coral reefs can naturally grow and shift to keep up with the rising ocean. But research by earth scientist Murray Ford in 2020 challenged that exact idea. His study proved that these islands have strict physical limits and the ocean rising way too fast for the island to keep up naturally. Between 2016 and 2026, moving away to places like Australia and New Zealand has become a necessary tool for survival. It isn't just a simple relocation plan, it's a strategy for dealing with a changing planet while protecting your family and your future. By the time recent climate data came out, understanding these physical limits became absolutely essential for surviving the specific environmental dangers in the Pacific. As we look at these images of the coastline in the map on this slide, it might look like a typical tropical landscape, but for the families who actually have to leave their homes because of the change in environment, this is really a high stakes journey for them. To put the scale of this into perspective, I'm looking at the data from NASA Earth Observatory. Their tracking shows how rapidly these coastlines are changing due to the rising ocean levels, which is a physical trigger forcing people to move. To explain the human side of this, I'm using the research of geographer Celia McMichael and her colleagues. McMichael argues that for the climate migrants, traveling across the ocean is never as simple or neutral as it seems. Even if you technically have the legal right to move, the political world around you, like visa restrictions, strict migration policies, and the borders of bigger nations, is fully set up to control your movement. You aren't just packing up and relocating. You're trying to navigate a system that wants to dictate exactly where you can go, where you can settle, and how you're supposed to fit into a brand new society. This is why having organized migration plans is about so much more than just crossing off a border checklist. It is a key tool for families to protect their freedom and keep control over their own lives rather than letting a rigid system decide everything for them. When we look at these three photos of Tuvalu, Kiribati, and the Marshall Islands, you can see just how extreme the geography really is. These are coral atolls and they average a mere 2 to 3 meters above sea level. Because their elevation is so incredibly low, entire countries are completely exposed to the power of the ocean. According to records from the Secretariat of Pacific Community, sea levels here are accelerating rapidly. Over the last 10 years, this has shifted from occasional bad weather into constant environmental stress, like frequent severe flooding and severe storm surges that ruin the land. Like we talked about with McMichael's framework, moving away from this isn't just a scenic boat ride for an island family. It is a tightly controlled path. When you are traveling through the South Pacific, you have to know exactly where the unspoken borders and rules are. The images and data on this slide show the political geography of that struggle. It highlights just how these families have to negotiate their way forward, step by step, just to find a safe place to live. When you look at the screenshot of the islands with the sea level arrows, you see a really harsh reality. As soon as you look beneath the surface, the environmental safety of these islands completely disappears. To understand why this is happening, we have to look at the data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Their research shows that environmental danger happens fastest when people are totally exposed to their surroundings without any kind of buffer. Because these islands are made of coral atolls, the soil underneath is incredibly porous limestone, meaning it's full of tiny holes like a sponge. As the ocean rises, seawater pushes right up through the rocky soil from underneath. This causes saltwater extrusion, which means the ocean water leaks directly into the underground freshwater pools that these communities rely on for drinking. This instantly triggers a major agriculture collapse. The high saltwater levels in the soil destroy the local food crops and ruin the farming land. This NOAA data proves that rising sea levels aren't just a distant problem in the atmosphere. It's a physical disaster happening right beneath their feet, turning these islands into immediate danger zones. When faced with these rising sea levels, how do these communities actually respond? Pacific Islanders are completely refusing to be looked at as just helpless victims on a sinking ship. Instead, they have turned global climate summits into hubs of intense diplomatic resistance. Pacific leaders are actively engaging in global forums to defend their legal statehood. Legal scholars have examined how these low-lying states are fighting to ensure their national identity and huge ocean boundaries remain legally permanent under international law, regardless of any total land loss. This strategy is actively shifting how the rest of the world looks at this crisis. The research shows that it moves the conversation away from treating islanders as passive victims and instead shows how they are acting as leaders who are completely redefining international maritime law. To understand the reality of this crisis, we have to look at the internal breakdown happening inside of these communities. When your drinking water fails and your crops die, it creates an immediate public health emergency. This represents the true point of no return. When a community's internal water and food systems completely collapse, families are left with zero choice but to relocate just to survive. Research on these islands show that contaminated fresh water leads directly to spikes in waterborne illnesses and a total lack of daily medical security. On top of that, because traditional staple crops can't survive the salty soil, the local diet is completely destroyed. When the basic health and food systems of a community collapse from the inside out, families aren't just moving for a change of scenery. They are forced into these migration pathways out of basic survival. This brings us to a massive legal crisis on a global stage. Under traditional international law, a country has to have permanent physical land to legally exist as a state. On top of that, official United Nations records show that global maritime boundaries and exclusive economic zones, which are the color coded areas you see on this map, are legally measured from the actual island shorelines. This creates a brand new problem that global law has never had to deal with before. If an island goes completely underwater, international law has zero historical rules for what happens next. Do these countries lose their valuable fishing rights and their economic boundaries just because the ocean rose? The physical drowning of these islands has kicked off an intense debate over whether a country can legally keep its independence and statehood when it has no physical land left on Earth. When families do make the incredible hard choice to leave, they face the raw, everyday reality of trying to navigate life in a completely foreign system. Over the last 10 years, we've seen a steady, increasing flow of families migrating straight into major cities in Australia and New Zealand. There are intense debates happening right now regarding how international law should even handle these climate migrants. Because global rules don't officially recognize people fleeing environmental disasters the same way they do as political refugees. This is a completely unique geographic shift because the displacement is driven directly by the physical changing of the earth rather than economic or political choices. Researchers have documented just how difficult this transition is. Pacific cultures have a deeply rooted spiritual connection to their specific ancestral land. When you have to pull people out of that environment, it creates a massive cultural disconnect. It proves that losing your home to the ocean isn't just about losing a piece of real estate. It means losing a physical foundation of your entire culture and history. To conclude, the global community often promotes international climate funds as a symbol of global cooperation. But for the actual communities on the front lines in the South Pacific, that safety is still just a dream. When we look at everything happening across these islands, from the rising oceans and saltwater ruining the drinking water, to the legal battles being fought over national borders, we see a complete picture of the crisis. It's a reminder that adapting to climate change isn't just about physical adjustments like building seawalls. It is a powerful act of survival and resilience. This project shows that while the rising ocean is an incredible crisis, the strength of these families and the leaders in the Pacific proves that a community's identity, history, and culture is and always has been a fundamental human right. Thank you. To wrap things up, slide 11 just holds my official references and approved sources for the project. Thank you, everybody.